The Development Research Institute has been looking at policy approaches to economic development around the world for many years. The Marron Institute, which is newer, is focusing on urban management. And this year we're working together in a conference that examines the role of urbanization and better urban management in encouraging faster economic growth.
Gandhi famously said that I regard the growth of cities as an evil thing, unfortunate for mankind and the world. I think it goes without saying that I disagree profoundly with the great man on this one. And indeed, Gandhi's view reflects a viewpoint that is often, sadly, common in the developing world, particularly among leaders of many developing countries, who just wish that the problems of urbanization would just disappear, that somehow or other we would revert to a rural past. But I think as we look forward, the future of the developing world is urban, just as the future of cities is overwhelmingly in the developing world.
Development is not about trying to prescribe when, where, and what will succeed. It's not about trying to reverse specific failures whenever they happen, but instead about letting resources flow to whatever surprising success happens.
You know, we tend to think in terms of very smooth trends of the rise of a nation from poverty to prosperity. But behind that is this enormous chaos of little small units like blocks rising and falling, rising and falling, rising and falling. And you want to let both the failure and the success happen, because often, as I just was suggesting, failure is containing the roots of success.
We don't have to wait for the financing for the infrastructure to make a difference in urbanization. And that the role of the government, its most important role, is not in the financing of infrastructure.
You know, the only way in a market economy, the only way for poor people to live in the neighborhood they want is to outbid the rich. And they can outbid the rich only by consuming less. And that's a trade-off they can make. So if regulation prevents them from consuming less, then the regulation excludes them.
So you can imagine that a lot of the technology we use today are very old, and you can predict 3,000 years from now we'll use forks. We're not going to use some kind of fancy contraption and stuff like that. So this is interesting because you can judge political system that way, you can judge size, you can judge scale, you can figure out what has worked, okay? And effectively, city-states are very interesting to look in that way, okay? In something that has survived.
And the debate is precisely a debate between planning and spontaneous order. So a planning view at one extreme, at the most extreme, might see development as emerging from the intentional effort by somebody at the center that plans exactly how, when, where, prescribes exactly how development success will happen, and then it indeed happens as the planner expected. That's one extreme of the sort of planning view of development. The opposite extreme is that development isn't planned, that it emerges spontaneously from the actions of many individuals. Nobody intended the final outcome, the final equilibrium. It just emerges in this chaotic, spontaneous way. Now, nobody is at totally one extreme or the other. All of us are somewhere in between. And so this debate is really about how close to one pole or the other are we in seeing how development happens.
What we're groping towards is the articulation of what is this middle ground where a little bit of planning protects a city from the worst outcomes of congestion, paralysis, unhealthy living conditions. What's the minimal level of planning that protects you from those bad outcomes, but yet still leaves plenty of room for that surprising, decentralized, market-led experimentation that is the ultimate source of value that we produce in our cities and in our economies?